welcome back to the From the Earth to the Moon podcast. I nearly forgot the title then. It's been
a while.
It's been almost a year. We nearly started this a year ago. You didn't realise that?
What a year.
Yeah.
So much has happened.
And we got it finished in time as well.
We did.
In timely fashion.
Because the previous podcast took a year to finish.
Yeah, that wasn't good. Well, it was very good. It's just family and
our timekeeping left something to be desired. But this time, we finished in a timely manner. Although we are coming to this a bit late.
Yeah, but we're kind of rounding off the year, so I think that works. Anyway, let's not worry about our timekeeping schedules, etc. Or if you're in America, schedules.
Yes. We should introduce who we are, though, because people might not know.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm Elton. This is Andy.
Hello.
And normally on this feed, we would be talking about From the Earth to the Moon, but we have finished that series. We started it with Apollo 13 and finished.
Which technically isn't part of the series. It is a film. And we're kind of bookending it.
Yes, I think this works very well, actually, because we are bookending it. This episode is the 2018 film First Man. Now, this was released this year. I've seen it, you've seen it, and we're here to talk about it, aren't we?
We are indeed, yes.
I think it works very well. We were talking about Apollo 13 in the very first film. We've talked about all the Apollo missions and a bit of the Gemini, etc. I've got into that fold of calling it Gemini now.
Okay.
I've fallen in. No, it is. Every time I read that word, it's Gemini, but I'm saying Gemini. Them blasted Americans have got me.
Damn you, filthy Yanks!
It's like series and season. They keep pounding it into me, and
yes.
Anyway, here I am.
I'm getting evil looks from my American wife, so I apologize. Have you?
Yeah, so we're here to talk about First Man. You've kind of not forced me into this, but you was like, have you seen it yet? 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 And yes, I have seen it now. So what were your first impressions on it? Should we get into this, or do you want to talk about something else before we get into this, or are we diving straight into it?
I think let's dive into it. But before we talk about it, let's talk about expectations going into it.
Okay, yeah.
So this is a film by Damien Chazelle, whose previous works include a film called Whiplash and a film called La La Land. Have you seen either of those?
I've heard of La La Land. That is as far as it goes.
Okay. I have seen them both. He's a very, very talented director. He's younger than me, which irritates the fuck out of me.
Yeah,
but
get used to that.
Yeah, I know. But still, he's a very talented filmmaker, but his style generally isn't for me. It just doesn't click with me.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's fine. People don't have to like everything everyone does. It's fine. But I was still very excited about this film, especially given, Ryan Gosling being cast as Neil Armstrong, who is, while some people might say he's a bit po-faced and a bit like early 90s Keanu Reeves, I think is a very good actor. I absolutely adored him in Drive and in Blade Runner 2049, which is quite possibly my favorite film of all time.
Oh, that's good.
It's very good.
I'm still to see that as well.
Oh, okay. That's on at the Prince Charles Cinema soon, so we're going to fix that.
Right,
but
okay.
We'll get back to that later. So I was very much looking forward to this, especially since, in the prop making world community, one of the more prevalent prop makers is a chap named Ryan Nagata. We've spoken about him in the past because he makes spacesuits. Just does it himself. And he actually provided some of the spacesuits for this show. He did the X-15 spacesuit from the beginning.
Yep.
And I think he did some work on some of the Gemini stuff. And it was, just seeing that level of accuracy being put into this was quite exciting, getting that sense of what was behind the scenes. So I was very much looking forward to the film beforehand. It was something I was, very much, it's very much my bag, baby. And this is based off of an authorized biography by James R. Hansen, who had complete access to Neil Armstrong. They actually became very good friends, Neil Armstrong and James Hansen. So he was very involved. I think he served as a producer or an executive producer on the film. So he had some say. The film also had the support of the Armstrong family, who were consulted and, had I don't know if it had input, but, it was certainly things were run by them to make sure it was accurate and everything like that. So, yeah, I was very much looking forward to this going in.
Yep. On the other hand, I was looking forward to it. I don't know why I didn't go see it, though.
It's because you live in the arse end of nowhere.
That helps, yes. And it just didn't draw me in as much as I thought it would do. I thought I'd be gagging to go see this. But then again, I think I had the similar sort of thing with, what's the film that came out last year?
Blade Runner 2049?
No, Dunkirk.
Yes. It's funny you should mention Dunkirk because that will come up again.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, it's another film. It's in like the genres that I like. I look out for war movies. I look out for space movies, especially when they are science-based or biographical in sort of nature. And, that should tweak my imagination and interest. And this, I don't think the way that they handled the promotion of this movie, I don't think it worked as well for me this time. I don't know whether they spaffed a load of money on the promotion or not, but it didn't feel like it was everywhere. And then, when a movie is everywhere and then you're kind of drawn into, okay, right, I think I better go see this now. Everything is telling me to go see this. It wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm. It definitely wasn't presented as a blockbuster film. This has been presented more as an awards film. It's in the way I perceive the marketing, and in fact in the way I think the film goes, it seems like it's a film which is to use the term Oscar bait.
Oh yeah,
it's a film kind of designed to win awards and to be a prestige piece more so than a popular film. I'm not saying you can't have popular award films, but it definitely feels like a film which is going to appeal to a certain type of viewer and, especially people within the academy and things like that to attract them. So did you hear about the flag controversy? Do you think that, kind of played into your preconceptions going into the film?
When you say flag thing, I forget the word you just
controversy.
That's the one. Sorry, my mind is all over the place. I'm assuming that you mean about them not planting the flag or it not being depicted in the film as them planting the flag.
It's not shown explicitly in the film. You don't see them putting the flag into the ground. You see the flag on the moon, but you don't see them actually put it in.
Do you know, I didn't even know anything about the controversy until I had already watched the film and then looked at the Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. And so no. I mean, for those listening who perhaps aren't aware, it was reported that the film wouldn't include that scene. And before anyone had seen the film or anything like that, you had US senators describing the omission as total lunacy, which I'd like to believe was a clever pun, but probably not.
Yeah.
You even had President Trump saying it's almost like they're embarrassed by this achievement coming from America.
What?
Yeah, well, let's face it.
It's very jingoistic, though, isn't it? Surely?
It's a little bit. I know personal accounts of individuals who, because of this, chose not to see the film because they'd heard about this controversy.
Really?
And I'm finger quoting that, which is actually bullshit to my mind on two reasons. I mean, for one thing, right before the launch of Apollo 11 in the film, there's an entire sequence where you see one of the Armstrong kids raising an American flag up against a sunset in pure Michael Bay style. Yeah. You also see when they're raising in the lift up to the Saturn V, it's going by the words United States and the big American flag on the side of it. And you do see the flag planted on the moon. I mean, in realistic terms, the main reason it wasn't depicted is if you actually look at the footage of them putting it together, it's like two people trying to put together a piece of IKEA furniture without the instruction manual.
Yeah.
Because, it didn't come out as a big old flagpole. It's connect rod C into sprocket J, use torque D. And it's just two guys basically arguing backwards and forwards on how's the best way to put this thing together before they do it. There's no big glorious kind of like, again, Michael Bay-esque shot as it just kind of is carried out of a lunar module and planted in the ground. So I totally understand why they left it out.
Yeah, I think it's not like getting out of a Rolls Royce Phantom where you have the umbrella in the door panel. It's not like that. And you also have conspiracy nuts would be spaffing all over this because, oh, look, it's waving in the breeze. There's a breeze on the moon, but there isn't a breeze on the moon. Maybe they're in a studio. Of course they're in the studio. It's filmed over here, isn't it? And we're not from a country that waves a flag at everything. We don't shout.
There's a certain segment of our population which does, but we won't get into that here.
There is a certain segment which hijack certain flags as well and use that in their propaganda and such. But we don't have flags in our garden normally, do we? You don't have a flag in your garden, I'm assuming?
I do not. No,
I do not have a flag in my garden. And I think if we were to have a flag in our garden, then we may be on a list because that sort of thing, it encourages certain types of behavior. Or
I think it's more that we're speaking purely in the UK, and this is nothing against our friends in America, and I totally understand, the reverence for the flag and what that means for them. We don't have a flag; we have the crown for good or for ill. We have a queen that we do all that stuff.
We have a crest.
We do, but over here it's outside of football matches, and that brings its whole host of baggage anyway. There's a very, if I were to use the term gammon, perhaps, segment of the population who are very, and it's only ever the English flag. It's never the Union flag.
No, I think it was a Union flag up until Euro 96, and then it became the English flag.
Yeah.
That's what you'll notice on stock footage. But because we're not from that type of country where the flag is everything, then we don't notice that it's not missing. Whereas from America's point of view, and I'm just saying it as a Brit and an Englishman looking at it from that point of view, that is at a very important moment. And, to put your flag and something and stake almost claim to the moon. And that's what that.
Well, as Eddie Izzard would have you know, it's how you claim places. I claim this land for England.
Yeah.
Well, you can't relive it. Or do you have a flag? Well, no, then you can't claim it. You need a flag to claim a land. That's how it works.
Exactly. Yeah. But
I get all that. But for me, what was kind of silly about this controversy, finger quoting again, is the film has no shortage of very strong American imagery throughout.
Yeah.
Especially in and around the run-up to that. This was just a case of someone stirring up shit just because I can guarantee you that the Senate and the President and a lot of the people who were, upset saying that we're going to, boycott this film, they didn't see it. So they couldn't really say that this film is ashamed to be American. That wasn't the case at all. But I was just kind of interested if that affected your preconceptions going into the film.
No, not really. No, didn't even know anything about it.
Okay, then. Well, shall we talk about the film itself? And what do we actually think of it now that we have seen it?
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah. Are we going to do like a blow by blow on this, or
I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to do a blow by blow.
No,
unless you want to do a blow. I think it's better if we just have a general conversation.
Yeah. Well, we've covered this From the Earth to the Moon, haven't we? So I don't.
You mean Apollo 11? Yes. Well, but the scope of this film is much broader than just Apollo 11.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what. Before we get into that, let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. So, having seen the film, very briefly, what did you think? Overall impressions of it?
I thought it was interesting. It's another movie where it's familiar things from different angles. It's the same story again and again, but told from a different perspective or a different viewpoint. And I felt it lacked a soul, this movie, for me. There was something missing that really made me go, oh, do you know what? That was, I'd really like to watch that again. I'm glad I've seen it, but there was just there was just something not quite there. Now, I don't know whether it's the actual stand of it being just the Neil Armstrong story, and whether it's, we know what type of gentleman he was, or we've heard of what type of gentleman he was. He's very, very straight-laced, and everything is black and white. That's the perspective I get. There's not a lot of showbiz or personality charisma bleeding out of the screen for this, and thus I feel you get kind of caught in that, and all my focus was drawn to Neil Armstrong, but maybe for the wrong reasons. I was looking at him as if, is he going to do something? Do something? Please do something. You still haven't done something. You're not going to do something, are you? And then it looks like he's going to do that, and he doesn't do anything. Now, am I being too harsh with that?
I don't know. For my part, the way I feel about this film, you mentioned Dunkirk earlier.
Yeah.
At least I hope you mentioned Dunkirk. There was an edit at some point. So if people suddenly go, what did you mention Dunkirk?
I did, yes.
There you go. So I think with Dunkirk, it's a collection of really good individual moments, little vignettes, if you will, but it doesn't work as a whole. And I felt very much the same about this. There's little moments, little vignettes that I think are great. I love the bit in the X-15 at the beginning. I love the Gemini stuff. I think was awesome. The actual landing of Apollo 11 I thought was great. How that was all done. But a lot of the connective tissue, it just kind of jumps around a little bit too much. The connecting tissue is just too weak for these good moments. It's almost like they had not enough time to tell everything they wanted to tell, which, given the scope they've tried to do, I can understand that. But it just, for me, it felt like you had stuff which didn't go anywhere. They kind of seemed to be setting up for a conflict between Buzz Aldrin and Armstrong in the way their personality is.
Yep.
But it just didn't seem to go anywhere. It just kind of fizzled out. There's bits where, something is said or kind of set up, and you think, oh, this, okay, so we're going in this direction now, and then it doesn't. And it's not that it's subverting expectations, doing something else. It's more just they forgot about it or didn't bother showing that.
Yeah. And
then it's like, well, but we were doing the thing over there, but now, okay, oh, over here now apparently. Okay, fine. I think for me, I don't want to say it's the problem, but I was hoping for more of a story about Apollo 11.
Yeah.
And in no way am I saying Armstrong isn't worthy of a story. This is his story, absolutely, and rightly so. But it really felt like the whole Apollo 11 bit was more of an afterthought than anything else. Even the way Armstrong's portrayed, it doesn't seem like something that his life had been building to until that point. And from what we understand about the man, I can understand how it can be. He always viewed it more as it was a job. Yeah. He was very much, I'm a test pilot. My job is to pilot an experimental spacecraft to the moon and land it and then return it to the Earth. That's my job. So I can see why he wouldn't view it as that way. But we, the audience, I feel should have been given more of a sense of build up and expectation, even if it's expectation from other people being heaped upon Armstrong.
Yep.
And I don't feel we really got a sense of that. You had Claire Foy, is it, playing his wife?
Yep.
And I think she does a great job, and she brings a lot of greatly needed humanity to the film, because with all respect to Ryan Gosling, he plays this very straight-laced, and presumably that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
But and I say this with all respect, you could have almost had a cardboard cutout standing there for a lot of these bits.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like people acting at him.
Right. I don't want people switching off because they think we're going to bash this movie. I don't think we're going to bash this movie.
I'm not going to bash the film.
This movie.
No, I did really, really enjoy the film, absolutely. Yeah. But I'll qualify my statement. I enjoyed bits of this movie, but I just to have a conversation about the film, I just feel we have to acknowledge that there are bits in there which are very slow.
Yeah, it's like going on a road trip between villages or towns, and the stuff in between the towns is kind of dull and not really worth talking about. But they try to talk about it. But once you're in the town or you're in the objective, that's fine.
And it might also be that because we're familiar with the Apollo story as a whole, because we've just done the entire podcast looking at from the Earth to the Moon and everything there, and I don't know about yourself, but I was always very interested in Apollo from an earlier age. I know a lot of the stuff they kind of touched upon. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff they touched upon, it felt like they were just far too briefly visited. Yeah. You mentioned Claire Foy. I felt that she held this movie together. Definitely. She made those. She's the one in the car who makes it bearable. She's the one with the good tunes. Yeah. Yeah. She remembers to charge her iPod up before she comes along. Yeah. There's definitely that sense. I don't think we can in any way criticize this film for authenticity's sake, because everything I've read about this, coming from the authorized biography from James Hansen, who was a friend of Neil Armstrong, having the blessing of a family and everything like that, I'm going to take it as read that there was very little creative license taken in the film. The only major bit is the bit which happens on the moon, which we'll talk to in a second. Right, I was going to ask you that. So yeah, okay. As long as we can get to that later, that's fine. We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay. But I think it's definitely a film where we have to look at and assume that all the things which we see on screen happened, at least to an extent. Yeah. And Ryan Gosling is definitely the kind of actor who he dives deep when he's doing his research. He interviews everyone. He actually discovered Armstrong had a love of music by, let me get the name of this composer. I can't find the name of the composer, but the music uses the theremin quite heavily in it. Right. And he discovered this, and he brought this to the director and the composer, and they decided to incorporate that into the score of the film in its entirety. And then you also see that when they're on Apollo, has anyone got any music? And he's got the cassette, and it plays that really weird. Is that the instrument that Led Zeppelin used to use, where you have like that stick and you put your hand up against it? Yes, that's the one. Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's cool to know where I am. That's cool. The music's called Lunar Rhapsody, and it's by Dr. Samuel Hoffman. So yeah, he was a big fan of that. Yeah. Strange as it may seem, and he researched that, and all of the actors were sent like YouTube clips of the actual astronauts to watch and to kind of pick up mannerisms and everything like that. So accuracy wise, I think the film is spot on. And we've already mentioned briefly that they had Ryan Nagata, one of the best prop makers out there, doing some of the astronaut uniforms, flight suits and everything like that. Yeah. The spacecraft, so the X-15 and also the Gemini and the Apollo were almost exactly accurate, to the point of, it created a lot of difficulties for them filming and lighting it. They didn't want to have any lights which wouldn't actually be available, including in the flight suits. Also, we've seen the LEM before. Yes. It was the one used in Apollo 13, sorry. Yeah. That was the Aquarius. So you can see they went all out in ensuring accuracy for those sort of moments. But going back to what you said before, it still felt a bit soulless in between. It was almost like the film was on and we were busy in the other room and we keep coming back in and we'd come in and we'd miss something, and the bit we watched would be great, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, I don't know what's going on here, sort of thing, but oh this bit's really good here. Yeah, that could be the portrayal of Neil Armstrong by Gosling. But the thing is, if he's told, pick up on these mannerisms, act like this guy, and we know how he is portrayed in books and media and reports and stuff like that. And so if that's what you've got to work with and you're told to work like that, then he has no option but to work like that. And that is what we get. So
I think we know that he can act. He can put it about on the screen. I watched The Big Short again the other day. I love him in that. I think he's brilliant in that. And so we know he's diverse and he can stick it around a little bit. And so if this is what he's told to do, that's what we get. And so we have it's not our fault. It's not his fault. It's no one's fault, but that's what we have to work with. And so this is the type of movie. If you want a story of rocks in the desert, someone will go out and film rocks in the desert. And if you're not happy with 120 minutes of rocks in the desert, well, then don't film that.
Yeah.
That's what you've got. That's what you got to play with. There's only so much you're going to get from that. And I suppose if you're trying to get into this type of character, you can either go two ways about it. You could fluff it up a little bit for everyone, and people might be like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, that's not quite him, but yeah, we're getting edges of that. That's fine. That works. Or you could really dive deep onto I don't want to do him a disservice, but just dive deep onto that lack of charisma. And that is what you end up receiving. And people go, oh yeah, that's him, but it's toned up a little bit, but yeah, that's definitely him. So, where do we fall with that? Do we want a little bit of fluff on there, or do we want the man?
Well, I think I think we want the man. This is, and maybe this is where it comes down to. This is not a story about the Apollo 11 moon landing. This is a story about the life of Neil Armstrong from his days as an X-15 test pilot until the Apollo 11 landing. Personally speaking, I think that was not the right choice, not the right way to tell this particular story. I think what would have worked better, just speaking personally, would have been a film focusing more on Apollo 11, but also his life afterwards, how it changed. So maybe a little bit before, have Apollo 11 maybe as, the big act, second act moment.
Yeah.
But then how his life changed after that, and how uncomfortable he felt with being that center of attention. Because he never flew into space again after that. And, he was very, very clearly uncomfortable with being the public face of the Apollo missions and everything like that. And also incredibly frustrated that the politicians pulled the money and kind of backed away from space exploration literally after he stepped on the moon.
Yeah.
As soon as he stepped on there were people just saying, okay, we're done, we're out of here, boom. So I just feel that maybe this would have worked better as a TV series. Maybe this would have worked better as maybe a 10-part HBO series where you've given, well, it gives you a chance to then explore, you have an episode about him as the X-15 pilot and everything there, an episode about, the death of his daughter, dealing with the home life and coming to the astronaut corps, an episode dealing with, training up for Gemini, a mission, an episode about Gemini, and then the remaining episodes up to Apollo 11, and then a couple of episodes about his life afterwards, because that would allow this portrayal of Armstrong to give you a chance to really get a sense of what's going on without that sense of disconnection between these vignettes between it. And it would just really, I think, give a chance to see how other people were reacting to him and how the world around him was changing. Because if you're going to have someone as straight-laced and as as Gosling portrays him, I feel what you then need to do to make the film work and to be really engaging is you need to have what's going on around. Yeah. And you get that a lot. I think Jason Clarke as Ed White was great, and everything around the Apollo 1 bit was awesome. I really liked that.
Yeah.
Because what's even more gutting for me is knowing what happens to him. And so the second they introduce each other and they're friends, it's like, well, shit, he's going to die.
Yeah.
I want to see that. You get little hints as well of how he's struggling to deal with the death of his daughter. And I do like how he internalizes that a lot. There's that great bit where he comes home after the death of the pilots in the T-38, and Ed White comes out and tries to talk to him in the garden. He's like, if I wanted to speak to someone, I'd be standing out in the fucking garden.
Yeah.
You know, I liked those little moments, and I just feel if you had a bit more space, you could explore a few more of those moments. But as it was, they had to include the X-15, they had to include Gemini, they had to include Apollo 1, they had to include Apollo 11. And in a 2-hour movie, well, not in a 2 hour, well, yes, 2-hour, 20-minute movie, that's a lot of beats to hit. So you can almost see why they had to rush between one and the other. And I feel because of that, it does the whole a disservice. The bits themselves are good, but the bits connecting them are very flimsy.
See, I felt that sometimes they rush through certain bits as well. I like your idea of having, if it's going to be about Armstrong, then you're correct. You have the build up to Apollo 11, you have Apollo 11, and then you have the aftermath of dealing with the press and his life afterwards. I think that would work in a movie. And then you condense all the bits, all the interconnecting tissue that they had in this film, which kind of strung things out. There's a lot of silent pauses. There's a lot of just staring at Gosling. It's almost as if he's tidally locked to the camera.
Yeah.
It's just, there he is. Okay, right. We need a shot of Gosling. Keep him there. Don't move. Okay, cut away. And do we need that again and again and again? I don't think we do every single time. We know the pain that he's feeling. We've got that. I think the X-15 stuff was brilliant. That was the noise of that thing.
Oh, the opening of this. I mean, I saw it the super screen of the Cineworld in Leicester Square, and just the way that opens. You know, you got the noise, and you don't quite know what's going on, and it's very kind of claustrophobic until the release. And
you can hardly see a thing as well, can you?
Yeah. No, that was fantastic, and I really enjoyed that. I love the Gemini a bit as well, which I believe is the first time we've really seen a Gemini spacecraft on screen. You know, we had Mercury shown in The Right Stuff.
Right.
And we've had Apollo before in Apollo 13 and also now in this. But I think this was the first time we've seen a Gemini spacecraft shown. And that bit was really interesting as well. And, you know, the launch, I mean, it was a bit disconcerting on the big screen, just given how shaky it was.
Right.
But it certainly gave you a good impression of what it would have been like in that, given how, when they're sitting into it, how claustrophobic it feels with, it's just 2 seats and the doors closed and that's it. There's nowhere to move. And the idea was they were going to be up there for close to 2 weeks by the end of that.
Yeah.
It's just like, fuck that.
Yeah, I do you know what? I think I preferred all the stuff, all the shots from inside every capsule. I preferred all the shots from inside the X-15, inside the Gemini, inside the LEM as well. When they launched on Apollo 11, all the inside stuff from that, I think they gave you a real good sense of these things are barely held together. Yeah. They're held together, but they creak like boats. And I really like that. I thought that was brilliant. It's all that sound that you get and the heat cooling off and expanding and contracting. You're like, oh, that is good. That's what I liked. When you went for an outside shot, I could appreciate it. It's not what I wanted though.
I'll tell you what's interesting is with the Apollo 11 launch, most of the footage is actual launch footage from the 60mm cameras which were on the gantries, the spin up resed. But there's one shot which is CG.
Okay, what
and
one's
it
that?
Looks appalling. It's basically you've got
is that the smoke one?
You've just got the smoke, and then you just see the rocket lift up above it, and it looked appalling. When you've had all this beautiful actual footage of the launch, which was just great, and then you had this one shot, and it stood out like a sore thumb.
It was Thunderbirds Are Go, isn't it?
It was almost like someone had. It's like something out of South Park. It almost felt like some craft paper just kind of being moved up the screen. I didn't like that at all. But I loved all of the launch stuff, although, and this is just maybe something because I'm a massive space geek, it frustrates me that they kind of stop it after the first stage and then imply that it then does the translunar injection. Yeah. I wanted to see this, and I know that's just a me thing, but that frustrated me a bit.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy. I mean, it was trying very hard to be 2001, but when you got the docking moment with the Gemini and the what's the other thing called?
Oh, that was the rocket they sent up as well.
The Agena,
yeah.
the Agena target thing. That's very 2001 with the the classical music playing and the no sound and all that. And it's not as good as 2001. All respect to Damien Chazelle. Yeah. He is no Stanley Kubrick, but it was really nice. And I also liked how that tension ramped up when they caught him a spin and came out of the radio blind spot.
That's one thing I thought they did better than From the Earth to the Moon.
Oh, very much so. Very, very much so. And I feel that was because Earth to the Moon was just kind of like just brushing over the Gemini stuff to get to Apollo.
Yeah.
And as I said before, this was the first time we've really seen any Gemini missions portrayed on the big screen. And that, I mean, I could have done an entire film just with that quite happily. I'd have happily just watched an entire film of that, build up to that mission and that going wrong, and then the fallout from there. So it was great seeing those moments. But then after that, you've got the bit where he's called up in front of a national director and he's told that no, you did the right thing. And it just kind of kills the momentum for, maybe 20 minutes before we then start back up with Apollo 1 and then Apollo 11.
Yeah. It does kind of restart a couple of times, doesn't it?
Mm.
And I totally forgot about the death of his daughter. And that caught me sideways.
When you say you forgot, you mean you didn't know before this, or?
Do you know? I'm not sure if I was aware of it or not. It's one of those things.
I wasn't aware of it before I watched this film. Straight up, it was news. I mean, I heard about it in the run up to this,
right?
Because a lot of people were saying, this was a thing which happened, and I didn't know about this. But that was really, quite touching how that was dealt with.
Yeah, I think
itself.
That may have been it. I've heard of it on the run up to it, and then totally forgot about it in between. But yeah, it's just, okay. All right, okay, so we're going down this road, are we? Okay. And yeah, that's a killer, that one. That really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm a parent, so I think it's gonna get me, that sort of stuff. It's, I look at that and then, go upstairs and look at my daughter. And I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
so that's kind of a okay, right, let's pause here and we'll adjourn later on.
No, very, very much so. It's just in the pacing of it almost feels brushed over in the film. It features very heavily just after the X-15 with her death. And it's very well shot and it's a real gut punch. I mean, it's almost forgotten until we get the little bit where he has to break down after the funeral and he wants to leave.
Yep.
And then when we get onto the moon as well.
Well, we have a little bit with Elliot C. and Charles, is it Bassett? When they crash their T-30.
That's the funeral bit. The funeral bit.
Oh, yeah, because, you had her funeral and then you had their funeral as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
There's a lot of funerals in this.
There are.
But then that was the game, though, wasn't it?
It was the world. And they even mention on it that they don't like attending them, it's just being a test pilot. That's just kind of part of it. What was your favourite part of the film?
Favourite part? Definitely the X-15. I thought that was astonishing. There's a couple of shots in there, especially when I think he's looking back and he can see his contrails behind him.
Yeah.
And it's just a little mark that goes along and then it's just vertical. You're like, oh, that looks glorious. And the way that they showed him skipping into the atmosphere and then bouncing out, and it's like, oh, you're going out of the atmosphere, you're rising. It's like, holy crap, I would be cacking my pants at that point. No, down, boy, down. I thought that was really well done. And I suppose the actual landing on the moon as well. The way I knew that there was boulders and they had to manually override the systems to fly it to a safe point. But then I didn't realize there was this massive crater. I probably did when we covered it in From the Earth to the Moon, but the massive crater that they flew over in, like,
yeah,
that's not a crater. That's a mountain. That's a mountain range right there that you've got to fly over now. And that was touch and go. It's like, oh, that's so sweet. I like the way that, I don't know whether it was stock footage that they high-resed up or not, but the way that they almost copied it shot for shot with the facing down cameras.
Oh, I think that was all done for this.
Right.
And for me, my favourite part was probably the landing.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, the first time I watched it, I really didn't like the music.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, I've listened to it a few more times and I actually now really, really like the music, especially for the landing bit. And pretty much everything from when they go into the LEM until the actual touchdown, that's probably my favourite part, because you get a real sense of the drama and the tension and how close it came to just having to abort. And you can really get the sense there of how focused he was on actually landing.
Yeah.
Because, up until that point, it's almost come across as he doesn't care. He's there in the room, but he's just not present. At least that's how it comes across. But you can see with Buzz, looking between the fuel counter, the warning master alarms, the 1202 alarm that was coming through, and all of these sort of moments, you definitely see that he's like, are we aborting this? What are we doing? And Armstrong's just laser focused on getting it down. And the way that music builds on the big screen, when you get that reveal of the lunar surface and you've got the tiny LEM just kind of passing across, that's just amazing. And it really gives you a sense of just how big this was. Interesting note, they actually got Charlie Duke, who was Capcom on the mission, to record new dialogue for some of that.
Really?
Yeah. So he's the person when they say the eagle has landed, and you hear him say, "Copy you down, eagle."
Yeah.
You got some guys breathing here who are holding their breaths. He actually recorded some new dialogue for them because they needed some stuff to just kind of explain to people what was going on and all that. And so he recorded some new lines there.
Oh,
and
okay. That's
still
cool.
Still sounds exactly the same as he did 50 years ago.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
So that was very cool, and I like that. Kind of running it through all the filters to sound like the Capcom transmissions, which was great. Yeah. But I love the X-15 stuff as well. Pretty much anything that was space was great.
Yes, yeah. Well, one thing I don't know if I missed it or whether it wasn't actually covered, but with the Gemini project where they had to undock.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the retro, one of their thrusters was just constantly firing.
Yeah.
It wasn't really mentioned about he actually aborted the mission. It wasn't firmly stamped into our heads that was an abort.
Mm.
Whereas on From the Earth to the Moon show, I nearly said podcast then, they mentioned that it was a clear abort. There was an abort button, and he pressed the abort button, and it was clearly stated it was an abort, and that is possibly one of the reasons why he was put in to Apollo 11. Because at no circumstances, well, I don't even know what that sentence meant, but under no pressure, this mission is a fail, okay, abort. That it was very black and white to him. And I think maybe adding that to this movie might have helped a little, because when you came to the landing on the moon, then you had that pressure of, okay, this is possibly the opportunity to abort. And you didn't get that sense.
We did, in fact, I seem to recall in From the Earth to the Moon, one of the reasons he was picked to be the mission commander is because he would abort if it was unsafe. Whereas others might just say, screw it, I'll go for the glory. I want to be the first there. Yeah. I'm not implying that any of the astronauts actually would do that, but we get that impression that because he'd had that abort situation, they knew he was willing to end a mission if it had to be done. So, for the good of all that.
He'd do it 100 times out of 100, possibly other astronauts might have done it 99 times out of 100 and then risked the once.
Mm-hmm.
But he would be bang on. You'd bet his house on it. If you couldn't make it, then he would abort. And I feel that that could have added a touch more spice to something that it was just slightly lacking. I felt the tension in there, but then we weren't focused on the crew. Collins doesn't get anything in there either, does he, really?
He gets maybe, a couple of lines. I mean, he actually gets a nice line when he goes, make sure you come back, which I quite liked. And I think the problem with Collins is he's, Buzz Aldrin might complain about, only ever been known as the second man to land on the moon, but Michael Collins never gets any credit whatsoever.
No.
And if everything had gone tits up, he was the one that was going to have to fly back on his own.
Yeah.
So he does get a line, but the entire Apollo 11 mission, I mean, this is, like I said, it's a 2-hour movie. Trying to see how long do we get for Apollo 11? It's not long at all.
20 minutes, maybe?
I don't know, if it takes off around there. Yeah, it's probably only about 20 minutes of this film. And it just, it's not an afterthought, but it just doesn't feel like it gets a fair whack. I almost feel like I prefer if they had sacrificed. I mean, as much as I really like the X-15 and Gemini bits, they're not essential to tell the story of Apollo 11 or to really tell the story of Neil Armstrong, I feel. I get that they're important things for him, but to tell... It kind of comes down to what's the story you're telling here. You're telling the story of Neil Armstrong, but the reason you're telling the story of Neil Armstrong is because he was the first man to set foot on the moon. And I feel that should perhaps just be given a little bit more weight to it, a little bit more screen time. It would have been better, I feel, if, as I've already said, maybe if Apollo 11 in its entirety took maybe a third of the film. And I'm not just talking about just the mission itself, but like the immediate build up, the launch, the mission, and the return. Because all we get on the return is just him and his wife looking across each other in the quarantine room. And it's a nice touching little moment. And it implies that they're kind of going to work through their different, they'd had a big argument and a blow up beforehand. And there's differences, maybe they are, maybe they aren't irreconcilable. They got divorced. Spoiler alert, everyone.
Yeah. But
at this point, you don't really know that sense. But it just feels like there could be more there. And just, I would have liked to have just seen, they got that bit in there where you see how he struggles with the press conference, and then Buzz kind of takes over and kind of steers the ship.
Yeah.
I'd have liked to have seen more of that, but afterwards. Because
the confrontation, because it would be the prickliness of Buzz taking over.
Well, also from all accounts, and we've seen this from the Earth to Moon. This is also in Michael Collins' biography. Buzz Aldrin always resented not being the first man, to the point where he was more annoyed. What was the actual quote? It states he was more annoyed that he wasn't the first than he was glad that he got to go.
Yeah.
And I would have just liked to have seen more of that. They set up there was going to be some tension between Neil and Buzz, and you get the bit where he makes the comment about with the two astronauts killed in the T-38, Bassett and Elliot C.
Yeah.
Going, well, it was pilot error. They weren't going to fly anyway because Deke didn't trust them. They kind of got what they deserved. He didn't say those exact words, but that's the impression that's made. And there's just some other moments, and you see it's building him up to be the antagonist, for lack of a better word.
He's the bad guy.
It's setting him up to be the bad guy, and he's played very well by Corey Stoll, who was the bad guy in Ant-Man. But it just doesn't go anywhere. And I think that's a lot of a problem with this film, is a lot of stuff is set up but doesn't go anywhere.
do you feel that it's kind of caught between doing a Neil Armstrong film and an Apollo 11 film, and they didn't quite get the balance quite right? I'm not asking for an Apollo 13 type movie of the whole launch and the time in space, etc. But would you have wanted more Apollo 11 in this?
Personally, yes. Personally, I would have liked some more Apollo 11, because the problem is, when you do a film like this, you kind of effectively suck up all the oxygen for that film.
Mm-hmm.
Next year is the 50th anniversary of the actual Apollo 11 landing, but I don't think you're going to get anyone making a film about it, and it'll be partly because this film had just came out.
Yeah. So
I feel you have a responsibility to tell that story as well as you can do. Now, Armstrong absolutely deserves to have a biographic film, absolutely, no doubt. And it's an interesting story, but it's almost like this is a story which could have been done at any time.
Yeah.
You could have told this story any time you wanted to. The fact they chose to tell it now means we're not going to get a Apollo 13-esque story of Apollo 11 next year.
Yeah.
And that saddens me a bit. I would just like to get a really good, solid. And I think I said this at the time when we did the Apollo 11 from the Earth to the Moon. There just hasn't been a really good telling of the Apollo 11 story.
Yeah.
On the cinema, and this was our opportunity, and it's gone, which means in all likelihood we probably won't get one now.
Well, yeah, because it'll be the 50th anniversary, and it'll be TVs and satellite channels wanting to show stuff about this, and an Apollo 11 film would be primed for that, wouldn't it? They'd set it up, and so you'd watch it before or watch it after or around that sort of time, and it would be a big draw. Then do you think they're going to put this on? I don't think they would, because it hasn't got that pizzazz. It hasn't got that charisma that you're really looking forward to draw people in for the next 50 years.
In a strange way, the film's almost too successful in being a reflection of Neil Armstrong, in that it is technically brilliant.
Yeah.
Technically very competent, but it goes back to what you said before. It doesn't really have a soul to it. I'm not saying in any way that Neil Armstrong didn't have a soul, but from all accounts, he was a very difficult person to like socially, to want to be around. Yeah. And it feels like that's this film. It's a very difficult film to want to recommend to people to watch.
Yeah.
If you're interested in the life of Neil Armstrong, if you're interested in X-15, Gemini, Apollo, absolutely you're going to watch this. But unlike Apollo 13, which I would happily recommend to anyone who had no interest in space as just a good film on its own, I don't think I could do the same with this. I don't think I could recommend this to anyone and say, hey, if you want to see a really good film about space, you should check out First Man. I don't think I could do that.
No, this is okay, right, you've seen Apollo 11, you've seen all these other space things, now go
30.
see this. Yeah,
30.
sorry, 30, yeah, 11. Sorry. Yeah, you've seen Apollo 11 and all the other things that go along with that, and then you go and see this. You know, if you're full of the Michael Bay space, and then, okay, now try this to cleanse the palate a little bit.
You know what this reminds me of? And this is going to be a pretty deep cut, which I don't know if you'll get. Did you ever used to get those Reader's Digest compilation books?
I know of them. I think my granny used to get them.
It's one of those ones. Mum used to bring them home from church and stuff like that occasionally. And what you have is, you know, it's like a little taster of a book, a little chapter.
Uh-huh.
And you'd have a big book, and it would have like 5 chapters from different books. That's almost what this film feels like. It's 5 bits from other bigger, better movies. And they just kind of picked the best bits from each of them and then just kind of connected them together as best they could.
Yeah.
That's because you could do a film about X-15 on its own. You could do a film about the Gemini on its own. You could do a film about Apollo 1 on its own. You could do a film about Apollo 11 on its own. each of those is easily worthy of a 2-hour film.
Mm.
And instead we have one film trying to do all of that.
Yeah. Going back to the Apollo 1 stuff as well, that was the way that they did that, I thought was really good.
It was really good. It was very brutal as well. You know, you really felt that.
The end thump of that section was just, oh, that's different. And that's, well, I don't want to say good, but it was represented very well. It was that, the kind of explosion inside and the door bent out ever so slightly. It was
an implosion.
Yes.
But what I think was very good also was how you have the call to Armstrong at the White House. And, he goes, the mission failed. And he goes, well, that's why we have the tests and everything like that. I go, no, we lost a crew. And just that dawning moment. And given how well they had established this friendship between Ed White and Armstrong, this man who apparently couldn't connect with anyone, and he's managed to connect to someone here. And then you had that, and you just don't see any of the fallout from that, really.
No.
It's almost just like, oh, well.
You see a broken glass, and that is it. Is that supposed to be the representation of his frustration and anger? A broken glass and a slight cut hand. You know, you've got that next shot where you've got the three guys in a hotel room, and they're watching their friends and listening to the news report on the TV. That should be hitting us a lot harder than what it was. And
just going a bit deeper into the history of, Neil Armstrong, and this is stuff that happens later. He was later brought on to be part of a committee looking into the Challenger disaster in the 80s. And it's like, well, I'm sure that he would have been very much in the forefront of trying to understand what had gone wrong with that spacecraft. What killed his friend. I'd have liked to have seen some of that. How does he feel about going on Apollo 11? Because we see that in Apollo 13 with Jim Lovell talking to his kid, and his kid's concerned about the hatch, and and maybe the argument is, well, we've already seen that in Apollo 13, but I kind of wanted to see that here as well.
Yeah, it is tough because there are some films out there now, and recreating what they've already done is hard. Or trying not to tread on the toes of these films. And the big one is Apollo 13.
Yeah.
Having another launch. Do you do it the same? Do you do it differently? What do you do? And I think what they did in this one, put it inside, was very well done. But it is another launch. That's the thing that we had when we watched the series. Yeah. It's another launch. So how do you do that again? And that's what they have trouble with. It's the same as other films. I said recently on the Flix Capacitor, how do you show time travel? Every single director has to go through this situation where they go, okay, right, we need to show time travel, but we need to do it in our way. And they need to show it in a unique way. And there's only so many ways you can show that uniquely before you start treading on people's toes. And this, where you have almost identical equipment every single time, it's going to get harder and harder.
Well, I actually think that the launch in this was done really well, except for that one dodgy shot. and I just don't know why they chose it. It stands out like a sore thumb. And I just can't understand why they thought that was, it was Henry Cavill's mustache. In this film, it was that obvious that it was bad, because you had this amazing launch footage from the actual cameras, and it was glorious. It's never looked as good as that. I mean, that one shot, and it's just like, that's not good. And it's also very, with the Apollo 13 launch, there's a lot of dialogue there because you're hearing mission control speaking to the spacecraft and them speaking back. And you didn't hear, Armstrong's pretty much, Gosling's silent throughout a lot of this film.
Yeah.
I actually think he has more lines in Drive than he has in this.
I'm thinking probably Arnold Schwarzenegger had more lines in Terminator 2.
Quite possibly. And I know that's potentially a creative choice, but it doesn't work for me. It doesn't seem to work. I feel that it might have been better just to give a sense almost of him being a professional. He almost feels like he's a passenger. Mm. And arguably they were passengers at that point. But it doesn't feel like he's in command at that point. It doesn't feel like he's actually in command and flying a spacecraft until the LEM separates. Mm. And as I said earlier, that entire sequence from separation to landing is my favorite bit in the entire film. Shall we talk about a bit on the moon?
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah. Were you pleased with what they did with it then?
I mean, I really liked seeing that stuff on the moon. They got the motion pretty much spot on, that kind of bunny hop that they do. Mm-hmm. If you look at some of the makings of, they kind of had big gantries overhead with bungee cords as they're kind of jumping around, which gave them that kind of lightness. We don't see them actually put the flag on the moon, as we mentioned at the top of the show.
Yeah.
But if you want to go and look at the actual footage, it's on YouTube. And like I said, it's like watching, an old couple trying to put together some IKEA furniture without all the screws or the instructions. It doesn't make for riveting viewing, I promise you. Mm. But I don't want to call it a controversy, but a bit which is stands out is at one point he goes off on his own, goes off comms, and we see him holding the bracelet from his daughter.
Yeah.
And he tosses it into a crater. What do you think of that?
I don't know whether that happened or not. I know the guys took bits up, and some of them got reprimanded for that, as we covered in earlier episodes. But was that a true thing, or was that just creative license? So
to qualify, the astronauts were all allowed a personal kit bag to take up with them. It had a fancy name, which I can't remember what it is at the moment, but they were all allowed to take personal items, personal effects with them, because if you recall, astronauts weren't allowed to have life insurance.
Yeah.
So the idea was you took something up, it's been to the moon, anything happens to you, your loved ones can sell that to be able to live. Now on the launch manifest, because everything is accounted for, they only state it will be personal supplies, so we don't know what's going into there. And publicly, what we know is, and I actually have a list. Oh, here you go. It's personal preference kit, PPK. And the only things which Armstrong has ever said and family have said is there was parts of the White Flyer, which was the first heavy of an aircraft to fly. Mm-hmm. Which was donated and then returned to the US Air Force Museum, a fraternity pin, some Apollo 11 medallions. Those would have been the life insurance policy, if you will.
Yep.
Some jewelry for his wife and mother, and some things for other people. That's what he says. And Janet Armstrong doesn't believe he carried any items up for his sons.
Right.
So all they know for a fact is he had undisclosed items in his kit, and they know he went off comms for a period during the mission. What he did when he was off comms, no one knows. And no one will ever know because he's never divulged it.
Yeah.
So there's nothing saying he did do it. There's nothing saying he didn't do it. It's perfectly in keeping he could have. Okay. So from an accuracy point, I don't have a problem with it. From a storytelling point, I like the moment, but what I feel is lacking is they didn't keep that thread up throughout the film.
Yeah.
It was so, I mean, at that point, you're maybe 2 hours from the passing of his daughter, and probably the last time we even saw that bracelet. And it's not something that's kind of really referred. I think it harkens back to maybe once in the rest of the film entirely. And just because of that, it doesn't feel like we get the connection between the two. It almost feels like an afterthought. It's a nice moment that I don't feel is earned by the film.
It's oh man, I'll probably get shot down for this. It's not a talk to me goose type moment, is it?
Wow.
It's not though, because we've in Top Gun you've had Goose and you've had their boyish, laddish type behavior, and then Maverick gets the the dog tags, and he's like, talk to me, Goose. Talk to me, Goose.
What's my acting better going on?
Yeah. And then at the end, he throws them into his version of a crater. And you don't have that through the movie. And so it comes a bit disconnected. Mm-hmm. But if it is creative license, okay, that's fine. That's brilliant. You need to have that train all the way through the movie. But if you're going to do that, why not add a bit to Armstrong himself? If you're going to do it in one section, why not do it somewhere else as well? That's my thing with it. I like it.
No.
I think it works really well.
I think it works very well in that scene, in that moment, in that time, knowing what we know. I don't think it works well in the movie because, as I say, it's been over 2 hours since his daughter passed. And with the one exception of him, well, it's not even him mentioning it, I think. I think it's his wife says to Ed White, does he ever talk about her?
Yeah.
And he goes, no. And that's kind of it. Mm. And it just feels like it's shoehorned in. There's another bit which felt shoehorned in, which I just remembered. It's that Whitey on the moon bit in the build up to Apollo 11.
Whitey on the moon bit.
So, as we already addressed in the Apollo 8 episode, this was kind of at the height of the civil rights movement.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the song, yes.
Song and all of that. And out of nowhere in the film, they drop in this song, Whitey on the Moon, which is a protest song, because it's pointing out that, there's a lot of inequality, there's a lot of poverty going on in the US. At this time, a lot of colored people in the US didn't have voting rights or anything like that. So I can understand the perception there that, this isn't really something that should be concerned. There's more important things for people to deal with. And I get that, Fred. But they just drop this scene in here. Nothing before, nothing after.
Yeah.
And it's just so out of place, I felt. And it's almost like they felt they had to acknowledge it, or wanted to acknowledge it, but it felt very clumsy and kind of stood out like a sore thumb, at least to me.
Yeah. What, maybe having like a grain of protests prior to that as well, just possibly, to build up to it.
Or possibly, in the press conference, have a question about, is this really the best way to be spending our money? A news interview. There would have been something else. But this protest song and everything like that, I mean, it kind of takes place away from Armstrong and from the assembly building itself. So it doesn't, it's not like he was hearing it. It's there purely for the purpose of the audience. And I just don't know what the director was trying to do, other than acknowledge this was something going on at the time. But even then, it's like, well, it almost feels like part of that Oscar bait. It's like showing there's a humanitarian aspect to it.
Well,
I mean, no way.
It's an important feature, though, isn't it? A feature. I don't mean it's not a feature, but it's a
aspect.
Aspect. That's the word I'm looking for. It's important to the story, and so
but is
glossing
it
over it.
I don't think it is important to this story. It's part of the Apollo story, part of America's story, but I don't think it's important to Neil Armstrong's story.
Right.
And that's what this film is doing. This film is telling Neil Armstrong's story. So it feels like it's just been dropped in there to tick a box on the Academy Award checklist.
I don't know if it would be on the Academy. I think it would have been. You're right. It is the Armstrong story, and so because he's part of Apollo 11, then this has to be mentioned at some point. This was part of the Apollo 11 story, so it has to be in there. But just glossing over it like that, I don't think is correct.
I suppose my point is, if you're going to include it, do it properly.
Yeah. Or
don't do it at all. Have it in the background.
See, I don't think you couldn't do it at all, though.
Well, they didn't do it at all in Apollo 13, really, did they?
But that... you'd had this going on for some time, and so not
well,
saying
if anything, if anything, Apollo 13, it's even more relevant because at that point they've already won the space race. They've won the mission. So if you're using the argument that Apollo's taking stuff away from civil rights, taking away from poverty, Apollo 13 is even more superfluous. And obviously we're in no way advocating that because I'm very much in favor of space exploration. I think you get so much more from it than you put into it. Absolutely. But I just think Damien Chazelle included that bit. It feels like just to tick a box on that list of things you need to see to win an Oscar. Right. I remember when King's Speech came out, someone did a video and it's like how to net an Oscar. And it's like, well, it's got to be a biopic about someone who overcomes a personal tragedy. It's got to be based on a real person, a historic event. It's got to have, it's got to have this, it's got to have that, got to have this. And you're going through and you just look at the last 5 films at that point who'd won Best Oscar, best film Oscar, and it had each of those elements. And this just felt like that. It almost felt like because of that, it takes away from more of we could have had with Armstrong's story. We could have had another moment with him and his wife talking about his daughter before the Apollo 11, which would have better connected the crater moment.
Yeah.
It just feels so out of left field, unearned in the film, just dropped in. And that's what annoys me more than anything else. It's like you're not actually making a statement. You're not trying to make a point here. You're trying to tick a box and say, oh, look at us. Aren't we progressive and including something? But you haven't earned.
Yeah. Talking about the Oscars, so this performance of Neil Armstrong by Gosling, do you think it's Oscar worthy? Because okay,
I think it will get a nomination. I don't know if we're talking best act. Just looking at the awards, it's already been nominated for.
Yep.
It's won Hollywood Film Awards, Best Director, Best Composer, Best Editor. It's won Best Costume Design for the Hamilton Behind the Camera Awards. It's won Atlanta Film Critics Circle. It's won Washington, D.C. Film Critics for Best Editing. And it was also nominated for Production Design, Cinematography and Score. I mean, we haven't had the Oscar nominations yet, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if it got nominations for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, Best Score, Best Editing. Those are the ones I think it's definitely going to get at least nominations for. I don't know if it would win, but I think it's definitely going to get nominations.
See, I'm looking at awards. The ones that it reminds me of, if you're going for this type of movie, Ray. So Jamie Foxx won the Oscar for that, didn't he? I'm sure he did. Yeah.
I think he did.
And Ali as well. I don't know. I don't think Will Smith got the Oscar for that at all. I'm just looking for it now. Oh, God, where is it? Let's go Will Smith instead. God help me, I'm looking up Will Smith on IMDb. Nominated for 2 Oscars. Don't think he won the Oscar, though.
He was nominated for Best Leading, but he didn't win.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's definitely going to get nominated for Oscars. I don't know if it's necessarily going to win, but, I think... Because Oscars mean nothing, people. They really don't.
No.
Stanley Kubrick never won an Oscar, so that tells you what they're worth. But Kevin Costner did.
Yeah. Scorsese got it for The Aviator.
No, he didn't. It was The Departed, wasn't it?
Oh, it was Departed, yeah. That's right. Exactly. He didn't get it for The Aviator. That's right.
And DiCaprio got it for... it wasn't Wolf of Wall Street. It was the one with a bear.
Revenant.
The Revenant, yeah.
That's it.
The thing with Oscars is they're largely meaningless, but I think because Damien Chazelle won so heavily with La La Land, I don't think he'll win this time, even if he's nominated.
Yeah, because
they like to give people turns.
Yeah, they like to pass it around a bit, don't they?
Yeah, a little bit. Oh wait, no, it didn't win the best film. It won the because it was announced. And then it actually went to Moonlight, didn't it?
I know. I forget now. I really do forget. There were so many. It was between La La Land was picking up lots of awards, wasn't it?
Yeah, La La Land won Best Director. It was announced as the winner of Best Picture, but it didn't actually win because it went to Moonlight, because it was that, the whole controversy because it was the wrong film was announced and stuff. So, but regardless of that, I think because he did win for Best Director, and I think there are much better films that came out this year on the whole. Whether or not they'll be nominated, I couldn't tell you.
Right.
I definitely think it's going to get nominated. I think Gosling's probably going to be nominated. I don't necessarily think he deserves to win, but the Oscars are their own thing.
Yeah.
But okay. This definitely was a film made to win awards. This was a prestige film.
Yeah.
I don't think because this hasn't done brilliantly in terms of box office. Let me just find the so the budget for this film, do a bit of the old Black Dog here. So the budget was 59 million. What do you think it made?
120? No, I think that's too high.
It is.
80.
It's made 105 million worldwide.
Right.
Which, yes, is a profit, but the way Hollywood and the films work these days, if you don't double your money, it's generally viewed as a failure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it hasn't been a resounding success.
Right. Yeah, I suppose you'd expect more from this type of movie, but then I don't know, it's so difficult. It's a good thing because it's hard to pigeonhole what type of movie this wants to be, but then again, that's a bad thing because it's hard to pigeonhole it.
Well, let me give you a comparison. So Apollo 13 had a budget of 52 million. That made 355.
Yeah.
So quite the difference there.
Yeah, but that had the flag waving in it, didn't it? Really?
Oh, I don't think so. I think Apollo 13, as I said before, was just an entertaining film in of itself.
Mm.
That
was a proper popcorn movie, wasn't it?
It was a proper popcorn movie, and you could show that to someone who had no real interest in space, and it was gripping and would keep your attention throughout. It told a straightforward story. If you tried to show First Man to someone who really didn't know anything about Neil Armstrong or the space race or anything like that, I think they'd be asking, well, why is he doing this now? What's going on here? And have I missed a bit? Because there are jumps which aren't easy to necessarily understand without some background knowledge.
There's no Bill Paxton in it either.
Well, alas, there'll be no more Bill Paxton in any films. No, that is a great tragedy.
Okay, so in conclusion then, I think, because I think we've covered every base I want to cover anyway, unless there's anything else.
No, I think we've kind of covered everything. Actually, one quick question for you.
Go on then.
What did you think of the zero-G stuff compared to, say, Apollo 13? Because I couldn't find out if they actually filmed this in the Vomit Comet like they did with Apollo 13.
That is, every time I see like a zero-G thing, I think, okay, did they do the Vomit Comet thing or not? But I thought it was really well done because there was a couple of moments, wasn't there? There was in the X-15 and also in the 11 as well.
Well, the X-15 I'm almost guarantee was CG.
Yeah.
With him just grabbing that pen or whatever it was that flew up.
You had the tape player though, didn't you?
You see, that's the thing. The technology's gotten so good now. I don't know if they would, because with Apollo 13, if you don't see the full body, they're not in the Vomit Comet, and they were basically just standing on boxes, just kind of swaying around. But if you see their full body, then it's definitely zero-G. But they've gotten so good now at removing wires and painting stuff out digitally.
Well, look at Gravity.
Absolutely, yeah. So I couldn't tell.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to think that it was practical, but then again, if it is CG, then they've won the battle. And it's not a battle. It's just I should think that it's practical. That's the whole idea of it. It's a tool.
This is one of the things which annoys me about the Best Visual Effects Awards. right? In my mind, the best visual effects are the ones you don't know. And that, I feel, is one where you really want to be giving them the kudos. It's when they've done something, painted something onto the screen, and you don't realize it until you're shown it afterwards. And then you're like, holy fuck.
It was recently that I saw, maybe a couple of years ago, I saw the matte paintings for Temple of Doom. Mm-hmm. And you know that moment where they've been on the carts and they all come crashing out after the water?
Yeah.
And they're stood on the ledge and all the water is piling out. And that's all the matte painting from the far shot. And I saw how they did that. And that was a wow. I had no idea how they did that. And I doffed my cap so many times to that. I thought that was brilliant. But I think through the late 90s, early 2000s, because it was a new thing and we hadn't worked out how to use it correctly, then it was just using everything, wasn't it? Yeah. It was just, we can CGI that. We can do that. We can do that on a computer. And now I'm glad that we've settled down with it, and it's now used as a tool to accompany other things, and so much the better.
Yeah, I think when visual effects are used to their strongest, it is always in the service of the story, and it is to embellish and enhance, not to be the grandiose moment. But anyway, that's a little sidebar there, a little discussion for another podcast, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so in conclusion, then, I want a conclusion from you. Did you enjoy it? Would you recommend it? And will you be seeing it again?
Okay, did I enjoy it? A qualified yes. Would I recommend it? I think if someone was very interested in, if I knew someone who was interested in the Apollo story, Neil Armstrong story, someone who maybe had done a podcast with me covering From the Earth to the Moon, I'd recommend it to that individual, right. Definitely. But I don't think I wouldn't recommend this to my parents, for example. I wouldn't recommend this to someone who is just looking for an entertaining film to watch. I don't think this is a film that is accessible to everyone. Will I watch it again? I probably will watch it again at some point. You know, with a bit of distance, it would be good to sit back. Maybe when the Blu-ray is available, I might like to see if there's a director's cut or with some extended scenes and see if there is some of that missing material. I mean, weirdly enough, you know, Das Boot was a TV series.
Yeah.
Maybe this would be something like that. You know, maybe if there's enough footage, do it as a series. If there's enough footage cut out, maybe that would work better. I just feel that's where this film falls down. There's not enough strong connective tissue between these key moments, and I think that is to the detriment of the story. So yeah, I'll see it again. I will say that the score has really grown on me. I didn't really enjoy it at first, but having listened to it a fair few times, it has grown on me a lot, especially the landing scene bit of music. I really like that. So I would definitely recommend the soundtrack.
Right. Okay. I'm going to ask myself the same question then. What were they again? Sorry.
Okay. So the questions are,
did I enjoy it?
Did you enjoy it? Would you recommend it? Will you watch it again?
Okay. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Yes, I did enjoy it. Would I recommend it? Only to people. I would recommend it to people as like a documentary more than a film. It's not we need something easy to watch on a Sunday afternoon. This is, okay, if you want to get into something, give this a go, but go in with your eyes open, and it's going to be a bit of a slog type thing. And to people that I know that are interested in the space race and Neil Armstrong in particular, would I watch it again? Yes, I would definitely watch it again. But I am looking forward to putting about 5 years in between the watch. And then I think maybe a rewatch in about 5 years' time would be a good thing. I think I'd have forgotten about it by then, and then go back into it thinking, it dragged a little bit there, and it wasn't as good, as a bit clunky in places, but the second time of watching it, yeah, do you know what? I like that. And so I look forward to enjoying it in the future. I'm not going to watch it next week or, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, seems entirely reasonable.
Good. Okay, there we go.
Hey!
Right, so that is this episode over and done with. Where can these other lovely people catch you on the internets?
Well, you can catch me and the good Mr. McManus over at rogue2media.com, where you can find many, many glorious podcasts, all of them about many various subjects. You've got the Shonky Lab, you've got the Formula One, the Grand Prix Podcast even, which is about Formula One. You've got the Band of Brothers podcast. You've got the From the Earth to the Moon podcast, which you're listening to now. And you have the Great Derelict, which is where I talk about everything and anything to do with science fiction and whatever kind of takes my fancy. Also, of late, I don't know when this is actually going up, but I recently guested on the bOrgcast, where we provided a little, well, I don't want to spoil it if it's not come out yet, but let's just say keep your eye on the bOrgcast. There'll be something Star Trek related coming from me around Christmas.
Cool. Okay, I'm looking forward to that. I listened to your episode on numbers.
Registry numbers.
Just numbers. Bloody A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It totally went over my head, though. So, although I did learn a little bit, so...
Oh, there you go. You learned that it really annoys me and Pete.
I learned that it annoyed you, and also the nuclear vessels and the ballistic nuclear vessels as well.
The ballistic missile submarines.
Yeah,
yes.
That's right. Yeah.
There you go.
See, I learned something. So yeah, that was good. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Where can people catch me? All on the normal places, rogue2media.com, where you have Shonky Lab, blackdogpodcast.com as well. It's 4 idiots talking about films every week. And when I'm not on it, I listen to it. So, yeah, I highly recommend anyone else goes over and listens to it as well. Also, I think, yeah, since we finished this, I've started a new one called the Flicks Capacitor. And you can find that over at rogue2media.com, where myself and Ian Lee talk about time travel movies. And we've just released the film, which is called Summertime Machine Blues, which is a Japanese movie. And my, oh my, that was a surprise. So, yeah, head over there and enjoy them. So until the next time that we drop something on this feed, thank you very much, Andy, for joining me on this.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Top man. And thank you everyone who's made it through this. So until next time, bye-bye.
See you later. Ta-ra.